Good evening to all. Tonight's special Shavuos class is dedicated in the merit of our dear friend Levi Yitzchak ben Cyril for a refuah shleima and a refuah kreva, for a complete recovery and a speedy recovery. May the unity of so many Jews this evening coming together to learn Torah only increase his merit and the flow of Hashem's blessings to him and his family, that he should have a complete and speedy recovery b'karav mamish, and arichis yomim v'shanim tovus. Amen. Ken yihi ratzon. Tonight, we will study and reflect on a letter which was written by the Lubavitcher Rebbe exactly 60 years ago. This is a letter dated Erev Shavuos Tovshin Tes, the day before Shavuos, 1949, which explores a fascinating story in the Gemara which is connected to this holiday of Shavuos. Below the video you have a curriculum, a PDF, which you can open up, print out, and follow the letter inside. Baruch Hashem. Erev Chag HaShavuos Tovshin Tes, the eve of Shavuos, 1949. Amru Razal. The rabbis teach that Shloisha Dvarim Tziva Achetofel es Banov. Achetofel instructed his children 3 things before his death. Number 1, Al tiyu b'machloikas. Do not enter into quarrels. Number 2, Val timredu b'malchus beis David. Do not rebel against the sovereignty, the royalty of the house of David. Number 3, V'yomtiv shalatzeres barur ziru chitim. If the weather is clear on the holiday of Shavuos, then you should plant wheat. This is in Baba Basra, Kuf Mem Zayin Amid Aleph. This is the story the Gemara relates in Tractate Baba Basra, page 147a. V'kama tzarich iyun bazeh. The Rebbe says there are several questions that come to mind when one learns this piece of Gemara. Umehem. Some of the questions are as follows. Number 1, Val timredu b'malchus beis David miyuser, kivan shekvar amar al tiyu b'machloikas. Once Achetofel already instructs his children, do not enter into any quarrels. So automatically that includes not to rebel and betray against the kingdom of Beis David. That's certainly a machloikas. If you rebel against the royalty of Beis David, you're entering into conflict. So once Achetofel already gave them a general and generic instruction. Al tiyu b'machloikas, do not enter into any quarrel, into any conflict. It seems superfluous and unnecessary to then give the second instruction not to rebel against the Malchus Beis David, because that's also a machloikas. So if you're not going to enter into any quarrels, certainly you will not rebel against the Malchus Beis David. Next question. Tzavas Adam, the final will and testament of a person, the tzavah that a person gives before he passes on to the next world. Ubifrat Adam Gadol, especially the tzavah, the final will of a great man. Sha'alav heid hakasuv shedvarav heim kasher yishal ish bedvar elikim. A person concerning whom the pasuk testifies that his words are like the words that come from God, referring here to the pasuk in Shmuel Beis Perek Tezayin. The Tanakh says in Samuel 2, chapter 16, that the advice of Achetofel, the advice that he would give to people, consulting him for advice, was kasher yishal ish bedvar elikim. It was like a person consulting God for advice. Kain kol atzas Achetofel gam leDavid gam leAvshalom. This was the reputation that the advice of Achetofel had. The reputation this person had was that to go to him and get his advice was literally like going to God and getting his advice. This is the prominence and the high regard in which Achetofel was held. Certainly, the final will of any person, certainly of a great person, certainly of a person upon whom the pasuk says that seeking his advice was like seeking divine advice. Bevadai hi kailelas hayras ikrius, hayras klolius shebeheni keres shetase v'chuli. Certainly his final words, his final instructions before he leaves this world contains within them fundamental lessons in life and general fundamental lessons which capture and convey his Weltanschauung, his world philosophy, his perspective. And this is the question. Where do we see in this final will of Achetofel fundamental directives which he feels important to convey before his death, and ones that capture his life experience and his life philosophy? Also, what is the common denominator between these three instructions? First, he says to his children, don't enter into quarrels. Then he says, don't rebel against the kingdom of Beis David. And then he says, if the weather on Shavuos is clear, make sure to sow wheat. What is the connection between the first two items and the third item? Another question. What is the inner message and content of his statement to them that when the weather of Shavuos is clear, you should sow wheat? What is he really trying to say? Certainly, it's not only an agricultural piece of advice that if the weather on Shavuos is clear, you should sow wheat. First of all, we have to understand that as well. What is the connection that if the weather on Shavuos is clear, then you know to plant wheat? Why is Achetofel also telling this to them as a final instruction before his death? If he just wants to give agricultural advice, there's certainly other advice a farmer can give to his children or to other farmers. Why does he choose this piece of advice, and when does he choose it? He chooses it as the last final instruction before his death. This means that there is a deeper message that Achetofel is trying to convey to his family. And what is it? So in summation, we have here a few questions. In trying to understand what was the nature of Achetofel's final will and testament before he died, conveyed in the Gemara. Number one, the first two seem superfluous. He could have said one, and that includes the other one. Number two, why did he choose these three items as his final instruction before his death? Number three, where do we see in these three items a perspective and summation of his life? Number four, what is the connection between these three items? Number five, what is the message, symbolism, and significance of the final instruction? That when the weather on Shavuos is clear, you should sow wheat. And this, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is going to come and answer and explain in this letter 60 years ago, Shavuos 1949. A brief introduction about the historical context behind this episode in Gemara is necessary in order to appreciate the message. Who was Achetofel? Achetofel was one of the most prominent Jews of his day. He lived in the days of David HaMelech, of King David. He was brilliant. His insight and his brilliance were unparalleled by any contemporary of his generation. At a very young age, he already became the leading figure, the president, the chief justice of the Sanhedrin, of the court of 71 members, the most authoritative body among the Jewish people, the body that was responsible for the transmission of Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu, from Moses in each generation. And Achetofel was the chief of the Sanhedrin, the chief justice of the Sanhedrin. Achetofel was also the primary advisor of David HaMelech. And as we see in the pasuk quoted a few moments ago, his advice was so powerful that people treated it as though they received divine advice. For many years, Achetofel served as the chief advisor of David HaMelech. But when David's son Avshalom rebelled against his father David and created that famous mutiny discussed in the Tanakh in Shmuel Beis, chapter 15 and 16 and so forth, Achetofel deserted. He became a deserter. He betrayed David HaMelech, and he went over to Avshalom's camp. And the Tanakh describes how David HaMelech became frightened when he realized that now Avshalom is going to get the advice of Achetofel. Why did Achetofel leave David and go over to Avshalom to help him in his revolt against his father, in his attempt to overthrow David HaMelech and take the royalty for himself? Why did Achetofel do this? The Medrash in Yalkut Shimoni says that Achetofel felt that he was supposed to be the king. He was supposed to be the monarch rather than David. And this was the main motivation behind his rebelling against David HaMelech. The Radak and other commentators believe there was another motive behind Achitofel's actions. Namely, Achitofel had a granddaughter. Her name was Bathsheba, the one who was married to Uriah Hachiti, the one who David HaMelech sent to war and he was killed in war, and then David HaMelech married Bathsheba, and Shlomo was born from that marriage, Shlomo HaMelech. And according to the Radak, Achitofel never forgave David HaMelech for what he did with Bathsheba and what he did with her husband Uriah Hachiti, and always wanted to take revenge. Although David HaMelech repented and was punished severely, Achitofel never forgave David HaMelech, and thus this was his opportunity to betray David and ultimately to have David killed and executed. Now, in this fascinating story in the Tanakh, Achitofel gave Avshalom two pieces of advice. One was a brutally unethical piece of advice that he has public relations with David HaMelech concubines discussed in the Shmuel Beis in the Tanakh. Another piece of advice, a later piece of advice, was that as David escaped from Jerusalem with his loyal men out of fear of Avshalom, Avshalom should launch a sudden attack on David HaMelech. Achitofel with 12,000 people would go in the middle of the night, attack David, catch him off guard, and Achitofel said he would personally kill David HaMelech. Yet Avshalom had another advisor, a man named Hushai Arki. Hushai Arki was a loyal friend of David HaMelech, and David asked him to go to Avshalom's team and serve as David's secret agent, as an advisor to Avshalom, but then come and report to David HaMelech. Hushai was another advisor of David, who now publicly left David's camp and went to Avshalom only to help David in his cause. He was a secret agent working for David HaMelech. Hushai gave Avshalom opposite advice. He said, your father is a warrior, he will be prepared. Rather, you need to amass a huge army and prepare a major offense against David HaMelech. Avshalom decided to go with Hushai's advice rather than Achitofel's advice. Achitofel realized correctly that if this is the case, the revolt will fail and David will come out triumphant, and ultimately Achitofel will be killed. And thus, Achitofel, the pasuk says, left Avshalom. He went home, and as the Tanakh says, Vayitzavel Beisai, he gave a tzavah to his family, Vayechanak. He killed himself. He strangled himself to death, and he was buried in the burial place of his fathers. This is now the context behind the Gemara in Baba Basra. What was the tzavah? What was the final will he gave over to his family? Vayitzavel Beisai. Three things he told them. Do not enter into quarrels. Do not rebel against Beis David, Malchus Beis David. If the weather on Shavuos is clear, make sure to sow wheat. Based on the historical context, we can clearly understand the nature of the second instruction. Achitofel said, look at me. My rebelling against Malchus Beis David did not prove successful. On the contrary, I am now at the verge of death. And by the way, according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Samachtes, the rabbis say that Achitofel was 33 years of age during his death. Quite a young man. And yet rose to such academic prominence during his lifetime. So we can understand the nature of the second instruction. Don't follow my lead. Do not rebel against the kingship of Beis David. But the other questions that the Rebbe raised in the letter are obviously still here. What is the common denominator between the three? Why do you say number 2 if you said number 1? And primarily the great question is, what is the point of instruction number 3? If Shavuos has a clear weather, make sure to plant wheat. And the Rebbe begins to present his explanation to this Gemara in Baba Basra. Let's look inside again in the letter. You can open your curriculums, the PDF under the video, to follow inside, word by word. V'yesh loymar, we could give the following explanation, ubekitzer nimrit, but it's going to be very concise and brief. Roim hamalois nafshiyus, asher alein yishaf ha'adam hu b'shloisha. The height of soulful virtues and qualities to which a person should strive can generally be categorized in 3. V'nizbaru b'mishnah, they have been explained in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our fathers, chapter 4. Shloisha ksarim hein, there are 3 crowns representing 3 major virtuous qualities which a person should strive to achieve and attain in his or her life. Keser Torah, Kohuna Malchus. There's the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. There is the crown of Torah. This represents the virtue of learning, of information, of knowledge, of wisdom, the divine wisdom of Torah. The second ambition, the second great virtue which we should strive for is Keser Kohuna, the crown of service. The Koyanim who served in the Holy Temple, they were responsible for the Avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. This is the crown of spiritual service and commitment to God. And then there is the crown of leadership, of power, of influence, of malchus, of royalty. There is the great virtue of study, of discovery of wisdom, Torah. There is service, commitment, dedication. And then there is the power of leadership, of influencing, of motivating, inspiring, and molding others and a generation and serving as a leader. The path leading to any one of these 3 virtues, which encompass the 3 major goals and ambitions to which a person should strive, the 3 crowns we should want to put on in our lives in one way or another, the path leading to them, apparently, it would seem, could be one of 2 paths. One is Yiras Chetei Kabbalas Oil Koidemes L'Chachmasei Tam V'Das Oila Hepech. The first path, to paraphrase a Mishnah also in Pirkei Avos in chapter 3, is Yiras Chetei Koidemes L'Chachmasei. The fear of sin should precede wisdom, or conversely, the wisdom should precede fear of sin. Or as he said in parentheses, Kabbalas oil, the acceptance of the yoke, should precede logic and intellect, or the other way around. Which means generally that there are 2 pathways that a person can embrace in life. One path is everything is defined and qualified based on my logic, based on my search, my intellect, my experimentation, my discovery. That's one way of going about things. Till I do not figure it out on my own, till I am not persuaded and convinced that this is true, this is right, I do not embrace it. The first thing is chachmasai, the person's wisdom. Tam v'das, my rationale, my reason, my logic, my knowledge. And this will lead me ultimately to yiras chetei, to fear of sin, to embracing the right path in life. But what is the axis? What is the basis upon which everything else is founded? It's my own wisdom, my own logic. It's my individual quest. It makes sense to me, and then I embrace it. A second path is the other way around. The Kabbalas oil precedes the Tam V'das. The Yiras Chet is the foundation of the Chachma, which means the person embraces the authority of the Torah. The person accepts the standards, the truths that have been transmitted from generation to generation, and upon that he builds or she builds his wisdom. After that, resolve and foundation, then the person can begin studying, analyzing, dissecting, researching. To put it maybe in modern terms, you can say, there are two different philosophies in life. One is, the focus in life is what I ask of life, what I want from life, what I see as the value in life. Another focus could be, what does life ask of me? It's not about me figuring it out, but rather me having the courage or the willingness, whichever way you want to put it, to transcend my own wisdom and commit myself to certain traditions, values, and standards that are beyond me or before me. V'hinei Achetofel kol yamav hisnaheg ba'ofen hasheni. All his life, Achetofel followed the second path articulated here, where the Chachma precedes the Yiras Chet. Re'ei Tosfos dibra maschil koil chagiga tasvava mit beis. Tosfos in Masechta Chagiga writes about Achetofel as well as Doeg ha'adoimi, sheloi haya lehem yira klal. They did not have Yiras Hashem. They did not have fear of God. For Achetofel, the foundation was his logic, his brilliance, his ability to determine what is right and what is wrong, his capacity to define truth. This was the paradigm of Achetofel. What happens to Achetofel, as the Rashbam puts it in Baba Basra? He tells them, don't rebel against Beis David, because the results in his life were not very beautiful. The consequences for him were bitter. And therefore he cautioned his children. And therefore it was transcribed in Gemara and Talmud. Because this is not just a lesson from Achetofel to his children. It's a timeless, eternal lesson in every time, in every era, in every location, and to every person. It's not dependent upon a particular milieu, a particular geographical location, or a particular type of person. It's a timeless lesson for all of us in all times and all places. Al tiyu b'machloikes, do not enter into quarrels. That's the first instruction he is giving. Asher binyanav lekol machloikes l'shem shamayim idea ha-mishnah, shezal machloikes koirach v'adose al keser kohuna. The foundation for every conflict, not for the sake of heaven, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, what is the prototype of a machlokas, not l'shem shamayim? It's the quarrel of Korach and his congregation against Aaron. Although the complaint and rebellion and mutiny of Korach against the priesthood of Aaron, against the crown of Kohuna, was very strong in logic and intellect, Korach had he had very logical complaints. Nonetheless, it's defined as an ill-fated conflict, a machlokas shalei l'shem shamayim, with catastrophic results. So the first thing Achetofel tells his children is, don't enter into quarrels, representing the first and foremost of quarrels, the machlokas of Korach. What was Korach's complaint? Korach had a great point. Korach said, all the Jews are holy. Why is Aaron holier than thou? Madua tisnasu al kahal Hashem. Why do you exalt yourself upon the congregation of God? This is the prototype of every argument. Korach seems right. Everybody is sacred. Everybody is holy. Why is there such a thing as a kohen? Why is there such a thing as a kohen gadol? The answer, of course, is God chose Aaron to be the kohen gadol. God designated Aaron to be the high priest. This is the prototype of every conflict in history. Ultimately, people cannot accept the position and the mission and the unique energy and talents God gave them. They're not happy with themselves. They have to be somebody else. They have to replace somebody else. This is the essence of every conflict throughout history. Every machlokas shaloi l'shem shamayim. It was a logical conflict. There's always logic behind it. Comes Achetofel and says, I followed logic my whole life. My logic. You can end up undermining the keser kahuna, the ability of kahuna, of Aaron being a kohen, and you being a kohen in your own life. This is the first thing. Do not enter into this conflict. Beis. The second instruction Achetofel says is Al timridu b'malchus beis David. Do not rebel against the sovereignty of the house of David. Shehu heikim oil Torah v'oil tshuva. David HaMelech, the rabbis say, erected, he created the yoke of Torah and the yoke of tshuva, of repentance. Keser Malchus, the second crown, the crown of royalty. Av shal pi ha-seichel, although logically. Harei Shaul ba'achas v'nitla mimenu ha-malchus. Shaul committed one sin and royalty was taken from him. V'im kein alachas kama v'kama shekein tzarech liyaz b'David shechata b'shtayim. So certainly David's malchus has to be taken from him because he sinned with two sins. And the Rebbe here, the Lubavitcher Rebbe here is referring to a Gemara in Masechta Yuma Daf Chav Beis. The Gemara says that Shaul committed one sin of not wiping out Amalek as Shmuel Hanavi instructed him, and because of that, royalty was taken from him. David committed two. Number one, the whole story with Uriah Hachiti and Bathsheba discussed earlier, sending Uriah to the front. And number two, counting the Jews. And yet, royalty remained with him and his children and his family. So logically you could say, Shaul deserves to be the king. David HaMelech doesn't deserve to be the king. Achetofel followed his logic his whole life. And with logic, he decided that David HaMelech is not the proper king. Somebody else has to be the king. He himself, or Avshalom. What was the uniqueness of David HaMelech? So, Heikim oil Torah v'oil shel tshuva. This refers to another Gemara. Masechta Moed Katan Daf Tezayin Amid Beis, the Gemara says there, that when the Pasuk says, Nu'um HaGever Heikim Al, about David ben Yishai, in Shmuel Beis Chav Gimel, Nu'um David ben Yishai, Nu'um HaGever Heikim Al, Heikim oil shel tshuva. David HaMelech is the one who created the yoke of tshuva. As Rashi explains there, he's the one who set the path for every Baal Tshuva throughout history. If somebody sins, they say, be like David HaMelech, who did Tshuva. He is the one who demonstrated what it means to be a Baal Tshuva, to be a person who returns to God after stumbling. And the Gemara continues there, how David HaMelech would humble himself when he would study Torah, ma'aden atzmai ketailas. He would wrap himself up as though he was a worm. He would sit on the ground and wrap himself up like a worm and study Torah with complete humility and dedication. This was a very different paradigm than Achitofel's paradigm. If Achitofel believed it's all about individual discovery, I have to discover my truth, I have to use my intellect and there's nothing above it, David HaMelech represented the contrary trend. Oila shel Torah, oila shel tshuva, Kabbalah's oil, the yoke of Torah, the commitment to Torah, the humility in the presence of Torah, and the humility of tshuva, of having the ability to say, I made a mistake, I'm accountable, and I have to dedicate myself to something that transcends me. Achetofel therefore rebels against Beis David. He doesn't feel David is the king. He doesn't feel David is the appropriate king. First of all, logically, he has reasons that David should not be the king. And furthermore, David represents a paradigm contrary to what he believes is the ultimate perspective in life. And therefore, he should be the king. At the end of his life, he tells his children, I made a mistake. Do not rebel against Beis David. David's path is the right path. And then there's finally number 3, Gimel. Chitim hu meichel adam. Wheat is the food for human beings, versus barley, the Gemara says in Psachim, is the food for animals. Baal seichel v'chachma, a human being is unique in the fact that he has developed seichel, intellect, and wisdom. Ve'etz hadas chita hoisa. The tree of knowledge which Adam and Eve ate, the Gemara says in Brachas, was wheat. It was wheat. She'ena tinik yoideya chuli brachas daf mamarav. The Gemara says in Brachas that a child does not know how to call his father Abba, father, until he does not taste grain. And that's why the Gemara says Eitz Hadas, which is the tree of knowledge, of awareness, of cognition. It's the wheat. Because only when a child begins to eat bread, taste grain, that's when the child ultimately learns how to call his father, father. So chita, wheat, which is the food of a human being, and is the food of the tree of knowledge, is connected very much to seichel, logic, rationale. V'hine eitz hadas chachma v'seichel u'toy v'ra. The tree of knowledge, of logic, of intellect, as the Pasuk says in Bereshis, is good and evil. That's what logic is. Logic, on one hand, can allow you to cultivate your life and elevate yourself to tremendous, high moral, ethical, and spiritual levels. On the other hand, logic can also be used to manipulate and justify almost anything in the world. It's toiv and ra. It's a mixture of good and evil. V'tziva labanav Achetofel instructs to his children, shekedei sheyatzlichu hachitim v'yiyu toiv, if they want that their wheat should be successful, and the wheat should come out good and fresh, zetali b'chag Shavuos dafka. They need a clear Shavuos. You want to sow wheat, you want to have good wheat, you need to make sure you have a clear Shavuos. The l'cha'ira man is chadish b'chag Shavuos. Apparently the question is, what happened unique on the holiday of Shavuos? The information of Torah was learned earlier, far earlier. The Gemara says in Yumach of Chesamid Beis, never has a yeshiva ceased from our fathers. Avraham Avinu learned in yeshiva, Yitzchak, Yaakov, yeshiva the Shem Ve'ever. There was the yeshiva of Shem and Never V'chuli. So the wisdom and information of Torah was already passed down through generations. The Jews knew it. They could study Torah. They can internalize Torah. They can enjoy Torah. So what happened, Shavuos? The information was there, the wisdom was there. So Moshe Rabbeinu could have offered the Jews, whoever wants to come to classes, whoever wants to learn Torah, whoever wants to be inspired by Torah, come and I'll teach you Torah. What was the uniqueness of the holiday of Shavuos? Ela sheba Matan Torah is chadish. The novelty of Matan Torah was shekol Yisrael igdimu nasa l'nishma. That at the mountain of Sinai, the Jewish people said, Nasa we will do and we will understand. Kabbalas oil shlema. They completely accepted the yoke of heaven, Kemavur Bekuntris, as explained in the Kuntris, a discourse that came out for that Shavuos Tafshin Tes, a discourse from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. The uniqueness of Shavuos at Mount Sinai was that the Jewish people entered into a covenant with the Rebbeinu Shalom. They committed themselves to the relationship. They did not just have Torah at their leisure. You want to learn, learn. You want to experiment, challenge, grow, scrutinize, dissect. That was all available before. What happened at Shavuos was they agreed to enter into a covenant, to make a commitment to God, to make a commitment to Torah, to accept upon themselves the yoke of Torah in their life. Nasa we will do before Nishma, before we will understand. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu hischil anoichi. And the first words of the Ten Commandments, Hashem begins with the word anoichi, acronym Anon Nafshi Ksavis Yehovah's Shabbos Kofei. The Gemara says it's an acronym of I have transcribed and imbued my soul into the Torah. The essence of God Himself has been imbued. He placed Himself into the wisdom of Torah. When a Jew learns Torah, he's not only learning a logical idea, he's coming face to face and touching the very essence of the divine. He's touching God. In other words, in the very wisdom of Torah, there is something that transcends wisdom. There is godliness in Torah. Keser Torah, this is the crown of Torah. So Achetofel tells his children, he says, my dear chevra, my dear children, you want to sow wheat, you have to make sure that your weather of Shavuos is clear. Only if you have a clear Shavuos, only if you enter into a commitment towards Torah, only if you surrender yourself to the authority of Torah, to the truth of Torah, only if you humble yourself to Torah, only if you have a clear, unwavering Shavuos, then sow wheat. Then will your wheat, your Eitz Hadas, your Chachma, your Seichel, your logic, your search be successful. You have to have the foundation of Shavuos. Achetofel again was summarizing his life. I have tried the other way. I have followed the contrary path. But finally, before I leave this world, let me tell you that I have erred. And this is my message to you. If you want wheat, you want to use Chachma. Chachma is not bad. Chachma is gewaldig. You have to search and understand and dissect and internalize individually. But make sure that the wheat follows a clear weather of Shavuos. This then is the common denominator in all of the three lessons of Achetofel. What is the common denominator in all of the three instructions? Shahayisoid shel kol gimel hashleimus, Torah, Kohuna, Umalchus, hu dafke Kabbalah Sol shel amayla mitam v'das. The foundation of all of the three modes of perfection in life, to have Torah in life, to have wisdom in life, to have Kohuna, spirituality and service in life, holiness in life, and to have Malchus, to be able to be a leader in life, to be able to be a royal king in life. The foundation for it is Kabbalah Soil, the acceptance of the divine yoke, transcending your own intellect and logic. Shezeo gam ken remez hamishna da aviz daled yud gimel ksarim ein chuli v'keser shemtiv oilal gabein. This is also the deeper symbolic meaning in the above-mentioned Mishnah. There are three crowns: the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, the crown of royalty. But the crown of a good name, oilal gabein, transcends and surpasses all of them. Ki keser shemtiv, the crown of a good name, representing the crown of humble acceptance, of resolve and commitment. The Shem Tov, the good name of somebody who commits himself and surrenders his intellect and his ego to the truths of the Torah. Hu Tanai Ikri de Chol Gimel Ksarim Hanal. This is a fundamental prerequisite and condition for all the other three crowns, for them to be able to be cultivated and successfully adore the person's life. He must or she must first have the Keser Shemtiv, the crown of a good name, representing the Kabbalah soil, representing the Yiras Chetoi, the fear of God which precedes your wisdom. Ve'ein kan mekaymer laharach. This is not the place to elaborate any further. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe concludes, Bebirchas, Kabbalah's HaTorah, Besimcho, Bepnimiyas, with blessings to accept Torah with joy and in an internal fashion, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe signs his name. A guten Yom Tov to each and every one of you. Good night and good Yom Tov. And once again, this class is dedicated for Levi Yitzchak ben Cyril, for Refuah Shlema, a Refuah Kreva, B'chor HaMachi Vore V'Shasagidov, L'Arichis Yomim V'Shanim Toivos, B'Toiv HaNireh V'Hanigla. Good Yom Tov and good night. See you next Monday at 8:30 p.m.